Hi there, in this video we are going to talk about the second chapter, which is the data processing cycle. But before we start, let us have a quick review on what we discussed in chapter 1. If you remember, when we ended up our discussion in chapter 1 by talking about supply chain management, and we said supply chain management is the value chain which happens inside the company, integrated with the purchasing and the distribution. And then we said the value chain has primary activities, which are mainly 5: inbound logistics, operations, outbound logistics, marketing, and services. These 5 primary activities are supported by 4 support activities. And out of these activities, we were able to drive 5 cycles. The first one, expenditure cycle. The second one, production cycle. The third one, revenue cycle. And between revenue cycle and expenditure cycle, we find the financing cycle. And finally, the human resource payroll cycle. In each one of those cycles, we discuss the data and the documents. And we say the data needs to be changed into information to be useful. Information could be good or bad. But how we judge that the information is good? By checking the characteristics of this information. For example, the benefit of the information should be higher than the cost, and the information should not have material error. When we talk about the time frame, the information should be relevant to the time frame. It should give feedback, confirmation about the present, and prediction about the future. Also, the information should be reliable. It means nothing missing and complete. It means information should be neutral. It means no bias. And finally, without errors. If 2 persons judge the information, they should be able to reach to the same opinion, which we call it comparability. Information should be documented, received on time, and in an easy language to understand. So we say, if we are able to find these characteristics in any information, it should be good. And this is in brief what we discussed in the previous chapter. And now we need to talk about the process that we need to record this information, save it, and get it in form of outputs like report or output on the screen and so on. So how do we make the data input here? Well, the data input comes from different events or activities. And the events or activities, they are embedded in each cycle. For each one of those events or activities, we can search for the documents. So for example, I have here 3 cycles: revenue, expenditure, and human resources. What are the events or activities or transactions in revenue cycle? First, we receive the customer order. Then we make delivery to the customer, receive our cash, deposit it in the bank, and then adjust the customer account for any return. For each one of those activities in the cycle, there is a source document here, which you can see: sales order, delivery ticket, the bill of lading, remittance advice, and so on. How about the activities in the expenditure cycle? First, we request the item, which comes usually from any department in the company, goes to the procurement department, where the procurement department order the item, then receive the item and arrange for payment. For each one of those activities, there is an attached document. And finally, in the human resource cycle, we collect the withholding data for each employee on W4 form, record the timesheet from the time card, and record the time spent on each job from the job timesheet. So we need to search for the source information comes from the document which is related to the activity. For the document or the source document, it could come from the source or from turnaround document. The difference between the source document and turnaround: the source document is initiated by the employee, and mainly entered into the system by the employee, such as sales order or purchase order or time card. So this is capturing the data from a source document and recorded directly on the system. But the turnaround document, it's like initiating the document by an employee, sending the document to the client to check it, and then turning back the document to be entered. And good example, we see it in the telephone bill or electricity bill, where the company send the bills to the customer, who is checking the bill and then make the payment. So the turnaround document is checked by external party, which makes the information more reliable. So to cover up, we say the activity is supported by document, is affecting different resources in the company, and is entered by employees to create data. The data must be compliant with the policy and procedures of the company, and the data must be reliable. But how do we enter the data? We can either enter it manually or automatically. We can enter it now manually on paper or keying the data on computer, but automatically we make it by scanning. And here we have two different ways. We can either scan it by point of sale or by ATM machine. So if it's scanned by a machine, it means the data will be more reliable than even scanned by a person, because a person can scan the same item twice. So this is in brief the data input. How about the data storage? Once we enter the data and we check the document, whether it's source or turnaround, where do we store the data? We need to store it in records and put some coding for the data to make sure that the data doesn't get mixed up with each other. And we should create files in database. What are the records we usually use it in data? We use journals and ledgers, and each one of them could be general or subsidiary. The codes could be either sequence or block or group or mnemonic, and we are going to discuss each one of them. The records or the files that we created on database first should have records, then should have columns, which we call it attributes, then it should have fields, which is cells, and finally the actual data. So let us look at the records here. For the journal, we have 4 subsidiary journals and 1 general journal. The subsidiary journals are for the repetitive transactions that needs to be categorized in one group, like sales or purchases or cash receipt or cash payment. However, the general journal, we use it only for closing entries or adjustments, or for customer return or purchase return. So you can tell here that the subsidiary journals are different from general journal. And here is a good example, which is the sales journal. In the sales journal, you see here some records for different customers. First, we post these records into the subsidiary ledger, because each customer has an account in the subsidiary ledger, and then we post the totals, only the totals, to the general ledger. And then we have the cash receipt journal, which has different accounts, as you can see it. Some of them debit, some are credit. Purchasing journal, which is similar to the sales journal, where we have details for each suppliers. And for each supplier, we make a subsidiary ledger. And then we record the totals of the purchase journal in the general ledger. So these are the 4 journals and the subsidiary and general ledger. Then we have the cash payment, which is more or less equal to the cash receipt. How do we make an audit trail or audit checkup for the information on the general ledger by the end of the year? We match the entry with the journal and the subsidiary ledger. And this might be a good point to check the amount. So In brief, the difference between general ledger and subsidiary ledger: in general ledger, we measure only the total amount or the summary of the total. However, in the subsidiary ledger, we discuss the detailed data. And here it will show you how we match the general ledger with the subsidiary ledger at the end of each year to ensure that the amounts are recorded correctly in each one of them. The second thing, the coding. What is the first system of coding that we use it? It's the sequence coding. In the sequence coding, we use numeric, 1, 2, 3, like the checks number. So we have a check number 1, number 2, and so on. Why do we do sequence checking? Because if one number is dropped, we can easily find it. However, the block, it's actually the block of data that we use it for products or for the chart of accounts. And good example here. So we reserve the block from 100 to 199 to assets, 200, 299 liabilities, 300 equity, 400 revenue, 500 costs and expenses, 600 other income, 700 other expense. What are the items that fall under the asset? As you can see, all the assets are starting by 1, which is 100. All the liabilities start by 2. All the equity start by 300, revenue by 400, other costs 500, other income 610, and so on, and then other expenses. So here, when we create 100 for each one of those accounts, we call it blocking. It means you cannot take the liability, put it in the block of the asset. The next one, we call it group coding and then mnemonic coding. Group, it means you use along with the block codes, and here we go and choose the numbers and split the number by group. The mnemonic, we create alphabet, and then we use this alphabet to describe the asset. The mnemonic could be letters and numbers that are interspersed to identify an item. And good example here, as you can see, the first group of code, the first 5 digits, they refer to the zip code, the first 3 constant in the last name, 4 digits of a street address, and then abbreviation of the magazine. And this will be a good barcode for a magazine. It's a group coding. How about the mnemonic coding? Here you can see BGH stands for Buffalo General Hospital. So this mnemonic, it's easy to remember without going back to the manual to check the full meaning of any code. The last one in the storage, it's the element. And in the element here, we use the different element. The first one, which is entity, it means record. The second one, attributes, which means column. The third one is fields, which are cells. And finally, the data value, which is the actual value. So this is in brief what we need to know in the data input and in the data storage. And we will complete the rest of this presentation in a different video. I hope you find this video interesting. And if you have any question, don't hesitate to reach out to me. Wish you a successful week. Thank you.